Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something, well, a pretty profound idea. What if our own minds are the biggest hurdle to understanding reality?
It sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? The tool we use for understanding could actually be obscuring the very thing we're trying to see.
Exactly. And we're drawing on some pretty deep sources here, like Helena Blavatsky's The Voice of the Silence. It claims to quote the Book of the Golden Precepts, saying flat out, the mind is the great slayer of the real.
Wow, yeah. And she dedicated that book to the few, right? So this wasn't meant as like casual reading. It hints at a kind of disciplined effort needed.
Definitely. And it's not just Blavatsky. You see echoes of this everywhere. Buddhism is all about escaping samsara, which is tied to mental states. Advaita Vedanta has Maya, the illusion.
Uh-huh. And Gnostic traditions talk about a flawed creator, the demiurge, leading us astray. Even Sufism talks about the nafs, the ego self that needs refinement.
So there's this common thread. Our mission today is to kind of unpack why. Why do these different paths point the finger at the ordinary mind? We'll look mainly at Theosophy and Buddhism, comparing notes.
Trying to get at the actual mechanisms they describe, you mean, how this slaying happens.
Yeah. Let's start with Theosophy. They talk about manas, the mind or thinking principle, but it's not just one thing, is it?
No, it's dual. There's higher manas, buddhi manas. That's the spiritual, intuitive aspect connected to buddhi, which is like spiritual discernment, and Atman, the universal self. It supposedly grasps universal truths directly.
Okay, the higher mind. And the other part.
That's lower manas or kama manas.
Hmm.
This is the mind working through our physical brain and senses. It's our everyday thinking, what Blavatsky called sense thought. It's tangled up with desires, that's the kama part, and creates our sense of being a separate I.
Okay. And this lower manas is the slayer of the real. How does it do the slaying?
Well, several ways, according to Theosophy. One is just being dependent on the physical senses, believing only what you see, hear, touch. It gives you a very restricted view of reality.
Makes sense. What else?
It projects mental images and then mistakes those images for reality. It creates and clings to the ego the idea of a separate self, which weakens the connection to those higher principles, like buddhi and Atman.
So it builds its own little world and gets stuck there.
Kinda, yeah. And fundamental ignorance, they use the Sanskrit term avidya to doubt, and just ingrained mental habits constantly distort perception. Lower manas doesn't really know. It just processes sense data and desires.
And what's the real it's slaying in their view?
They talk about the absolute, or parabrahman, something omnipresent, eternal, beyond all our limited concepts. The world we experience through lower manas is Maya, illusion. Not unreal, maybe, but relative, temporary, like a shadow play.
Right. So lower manas is trapped in the shadows. How do you get past it? How do you slay the slayer?
Through rigorous self-discipline. Meditation aimed at stilling that lower manas chatter so insights from the higher self can come through. Cultivating wisdom, almost like an, attitude, and actively trying to awaken intuition, that buddhi faculty.
And suffering comes from basically identifying with this limited, illusion-bound mind.
That's the idea. Identifying with the temporary leads to desire, disappointment, fear, all the hallmarks of suffering.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly. Buddhism, they're obviously huge on the mind siddha or mano.
Mhm.
How does their view compare?
Very central, yes. For Buddhism, the mind, working through the six senses, including mind itself as a sense base, constructs our entire experience. This conditioned reality is samsara, and its defining mark is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness or suffering.
And the root cause, much like in Theosophy, is ignorance, avidya.
Exactly. But in Buddhism, avidya is very specifically analyzed. It's not just lack of information, it's an active misperception. Primarily ignorance of three key things: impermanence, anicca.
So clinging to things as if they'll last forever when they won't.
Right. Then, ignorance of no self, anatta, mistaking the ever-changing stream of mental and physical events for a solid, unchanging me.
Okay. And the third?
Ignorance of dukkha itself, failing to see the inherent unsatisfactoriness woven into conditioned existence, even in moments of pleasure.
And this ignorance, avidya, leads directly to tanha, or craving.
Yes, tanha, thirst, craving, clinging. It arises from misunderstanding reality. Craving for pleasant experiences, craving for existence to continue, even craving for annihilation. This is the immediate cause of suffering.
So it's a chain reaction. Ignorance fuels craving. Craving leads to clinging, which fuels actions. Karma, which leads to rebirth in the cycle of samsara and more suffering. The mind traps itself.
That's a good way to put it. But crucially, Buddhism says there's a way out. Nirodha, the cessation of suffering, which is nirvana, the extinguishing of the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion.
And the path to that is the Noble Eightfold Path.
Precisely. It covers wisdom, right view, right resolve, ethical conduct, right speech, action, livelihood, and mental discipline, right effort, mindfulness, concentration. These practices directly counteract avidya and tanha.
They basically retrain the mind to see clearly.
You could say that. They weaken the grip of ignorance and craving, allowing wisdom, prajna, to arise, leading ultimately to liberation. It's all about understanding and transforming the mind's nature.
It's really striking how both traditions, despite different frameworks, pinpoint the untrained, ordinary mind as the central problem. Theosophy's lower manas, Buddhism's mind caught in avidya.
Yeah, very similar core idea. And you can see parallels in Advaita's individual soul, jiva caught in maya, the Gnostic idea of the mind being deceived, the Sufi struggle with the nafs. The uncultivated mind is the barrier.
Though the details differ, right? Theosophy has this complex structure. Buddhism focuses more on cognitive and perceptual errors.
Exactly. Advaita posits a kind of cosmic illusion. Gnosticism sometimes emphasizes an external deceiver. Sufism focuses intensely on that internal battle against the lower self. And the ultimate goals, while involving transcendence, are described differently. The absolute, nirvana, moksha, return to the pleroma, closeness to God.
But the how seems to converge again. Inner work is key across the board.
Absolutely. Self-discipline, meditation or contemplation, cultivating wisdom, overcoming ego identification. These are the common tools prescribed to get beyond the limitations of the ordinary mind.
So the essential message seems to be, our minds are incredibly powerful, but in their everyday unexamined state, they can actually filter, distort, or even outright block our perception of deeper reality.
That's the crux of it. And the consensus across these diverse wisdom traditions is that transcending this ordinary mental functioning is vital for any real understanding or liberation.
It definitely leaves you with something to think about. How might your own mental habits, your assumptions, your automatic reactions be shaping your reality right now? What would it even mean to begin slaying the slayer in your own experience?
A challenging question, but maybe a necessary one if we take these traditions seriously. Food for thought, definitely.